In a world where power corrupts, one act of defiance can spark a revolution. What happens when a decorated soldier challenges a rogue cop? This is the story of courage, accountability, and justice. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Rain poured all night, beating on roofs and flooding the streets of Crestwood. Lightning briefly threw shadows onto the pavement as it flashed across the sky. Inside his patrol car, Carl Butcher gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight with irritation. He hated nights like this, cold, wet, and uneventful. But then headlights flickered in his rearview mirror. A sedan moved steadily along the deserted road, its tires humming softly against the asphalt. Finally, Carl muttered under his breath, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Let's see what we've got here. He accelerated, pulling up alongside the vehicle. The driver, a woman in military fatigues, glanced at him briefly before returning her focus to the road. Something about her calm demeanor irked him. Most people would have slowed down or shown some sign of nervousness when a cop appeared beside them. Not her. Carl activated his siren and signaled for her to pull over. The sedan eased to the side of the road, its headlights cutting through the curtain of rain. He stepped out of his car, the cold water soaking through his uniform almost instantly. Adjusting his hat, he approached the driver's side window with deliberate slowness, letting the authority of his badge hang heavy in the air. "License and registration," he barked, peering through the rain-streaked glass. The woman rolled down her window, revealing sharp features framed by dark hair pulled back into a no-nonsense bun. Her uniform was immaculate, adorned with medals and insignias that spoke volumes about her service. She met his gaze without flinching, her expression unreadable. "Is there a problem, officer?" Her voice was steady, carrying an edge of formality that felt out of place on these empty streets. "You were driving erratically," Carl replied, though even he knew it was a weak excuse. Truthfully, he'd stopped her because she looked too composed, too sure of herself. People like her made him uneasy. "Erratically?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "I've been maintaining the speed limit and staying within my lane. If you'd like, I can provide my GPS data to confirm." Her composure unnerved him further. He leaned closer, squinting at her name tag. "Major Madeline Atwell," he read aloud, dragging out each syllable as if testing their weight. "Military, huh? That doesn't give you a free pass to break the law." "I'm not breaking any laws," Madeline said evenly, handing over her license and registration. "But if you feel the need to detain me, I'll comply for now." Carl snatched the documents from her hand, his fingers brushing hers slightly. For a moment, their eyes locked, and he saw something there, or maybe just indifference. Either way, it infuriated him. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered, his tone sharp. Madeline hesitated for a fraction of a second before complying. She emerged from the car, standing tall despite the rain soaking her uniform. Her posture radiated confidence, and Carl couldn't help but feel dwarfed by her presence. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice still calm but laced with skepticism. "It's about respecting the law," Carl snapped, grabbing her wrist and twisting it behind her back. "And learning to show some humility." Madeline winced but didn't resist as he slapped handcuffs onto her wrists. The metallic click echoed in the silence of the storm. As Carl guided her toward the patrol car, she paused briefly, glancing back at her sedan. With a subtle movement, she tapped the pocket of her jacket, activating the voice recorder hidden inside. "This isn't over," she murmured, so quietly that only the rain could hear. Carl shoved her into the back seat, slamming the door shut. He climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly as he sped off toward the station. In the rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of Madeline's face, calm, calculating, and utterly unafraid. This wasn't just another arrest. Something about Major Madeline Atwell told him he had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. As the patrol car disappeared into the storm, the red glow of Madeline's phone screen blinked faintly inside her abandoned sedan. The recording continued, capturing every word, every accusation, every threat. Unbeknownst to Carl, Madeline had already begun laying the groundwork for his downfall. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the sterile environment. The smell of stale coffee and damp uniforms lingered in the air as Carl escorted Madeline through the labyrinthine corridors. His grip on her arm was firm, almost punishing, but she didn't flinch. Her silence unnerved him more than any protest could have. "Processing room," Carl announced curtly to the desk sergeant, shoving Madeline into a chair. The officer behind the desk glanced up briefly before returning to his paperwork. "Name? Major Madeline Atwell," she replied calmly, meeting his gaze with an unwavering stare. The desk sergeant hesitated, his pen hovering mid-air. "Military? That's right," Madeline said, her voice carrying a note of quiet authority. "And I'd appreciate it if you noted that my detention lacks justification." Carl scoffed, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "Save it for the judge, Major." Madeline didn't respond. Instead, she observed everything: the layout of the room, the cameras mounted in the corners, the nervous glances exchanged between the officers. Every detail mattered. Once the formalities were completed, Carl led her to a holding cell. The metal bars clanged shut behind her, sealing her inside. He lingered for a moment, studying her face for any sign of fear or frustration. But all he found was calm determination. "You think your fancy uniform protects you?" Carl sneered, his voice low so only she could hear. "Out here, I'm the one with the power." Madeline tilted her head slightly, regarding him with detached curiosity. "Power doesn't last forever, Officer Butcher." Her words hit a nerve, and Carl clenched his fists before storming off. Inside the cell, Madeline wasted no time. She sat cross-legged on the narrow bench, mentally retracing every step of her arrest. Using the station's procedures manual posted on the wall, a requirement for transparency, she began cataloging each violation Carl had committed. From failing to articulate probable cause to mishandling evidence, she left nothing out. When the opportunity arose, she requested access to a phone, citing her rights as a detainee. After some grumbling from the desk sergeant, she was allowed a single call. "Colonel Mills," she said when the line connected, her tone respectful yet urgent. "This is Major Atwell. I need your assistance." On the other end, Colonel Peter Mills listened intently as Madeline explained the situation. His deep voice rumbled with controlled anger when she finished. "Consider this matter handled, Major. No one messes with one of ours." With Mills mobilizing resources, Madeline felt a surge of confidence. She knew the wheels of justice were slow to turn, but they were inexorable once set in motion. Meanwhile, Carl regaled his fellow officers in the break room with exaggerated tales of his encounter with Madeline. "This military hotshot thought she was untouchable," he boasted, slapping the table for emphasis. "But guess what? She's sitting in a cell right now, same as anyone else." His audience chuckled politely, though Jessica Trent, a rookie officer with a sharp eye for injustice, remained silent. She watched Carl closely, noting the smugness etched into his features. "Something feels off," Jessica muttered to herself later, reviewing the body cam footage Carl had submitted. It didn't take long for her to spot discrepancies. Missing timestamps, inconsistent audio, and angles conveniently obscured by rain. Back in the holding area, Carl decided to check on Madeline one last time before heading home. He approached her cell, his expression smug. "How's the accommodations treating you, Major?" he taunted. Madeline looked up from the corner of the cell where she sat, her eyes glinting like steel. "Comfortable enough," she replied coolly. "Though I imagine you'll be less comfortable once the truth comes out." Carl frowned, stepping closer to the bars. "What are you talking about?" Madeline leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into." Her words sent a chill down his spine. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Who exactly was this woman? And why did she seem so certain of victory? As Carl retreated from the cell, shaken by Madeline's cryptic warning, Jessica Trent lingered nearby, watching him with growing suspicion. Later that evening, she slipped into the records room and retrieved Madeline's file. Among the documents was a handwritten note tucked discreetly inside. "Trust me, I'm not alone." Jessica stared at the message, her heart racing, wondering what Madeline was planning that no one had yet realized, and how far she would go to bring Carl down. The next morning brought a palpable shift in the atmosphere at the Crestwood Police Department. The storm outside had subsided, but inside, tensions simmered like a pot ready to boil over. Word spread quickly among the officers that Colonel Peter Mills, a name synonymous with authority and influence, had contacted the department demanding answers about Major Madeline Atwell's detention. Carl arrived late, his usual swagger replaced by a restless energy. He could feel the weight of eyes following him as he strode through the station. Whispers echoed in the hallways, though no one dared confront him directly. In the holding cell, Madeline sat upright, her posture as composed as ever. She had spent the night strategizing, mentally mapping out every step she needed to take to expose Carl's corruption. When the desk sergeant finally unlocked her cell, she stepped out without hesitation, her gaze steady. "Major Atwell," a stern voice called from across the room. It was Lieutenant Harris, the station's second-in-command. "Colonel Mills has requested your release pending further review. You're free to go, for now." Madeline nodded curtly. "Thank you, Lieutenant. But this isn't over." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. At the same time, Colonel Mills was already hard at work dismantling Carl's facade. From his office in Washington, D.C., he coordinated with military legal advisors and local law enforcement contacts to gather evidence. Emails flooded in from former victims of Carl's abuse, some too afraid to speak up before, others emboldened by Madeline's courage. Each story painted a disturbing picture of systemic misconduct. One particularly damning piece of evidence came from Jessica Trent, who discreetly handed Madeline a flash drive during their brief exchange in the hallway. "This is everything I could find," Jessica whispered urgently. "Body cam footage, incident reports, internal complaints. It's all there." Madeline accepted the drive with a nod of gratitude. "You're taking a big risk, Officer Trent. Are you sure about this?" Jessica hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "I've seen enough to know something's wrong here. If you can stop him, I'll do whatever it takes to help." Their alliance solidified. Madeline returned to her temporary quarters at a nearby hotel. There, she meticulously reviewed the contents of the flash drive alongside the notes she'd compiled in the cell. Together, they formed an irrefutable case against Carl. Back at the station, Carl's paranoia reached new heights. He couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching him. Their sidelong glances, their hushed conversations. Even Lieutenant Harris seemed unusually cold when summoning him for a meeting. "What's going on?" Carl demanded as he entered the lieutenant's office. Harris gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. "Sit down, Butcher. We need to talk." Reluctantly, Carl obeyed. "It's come to my attention that your recent arrest of Major Atwell may have violated protocol," Harris began, his tone clipped. "And there are concerns about other incidents involving you." Carl's face flushed red with indignation. "Concerns? From who?" "That woman provoked me." "That woman happens to be a highly decorated officer with powerful connections," Harris shot back. "And Colonel Mills doesn't strike me as someone who tolerates excuses." Before Carl could respond, the door opened, and Jessica stepped in, holding a folder stuffed with documents. Her expression was unreadable as she placed it on Harris's desk. "These are additional materials related to Officer Butcher's conduct," she said evenly, "including statements from multiple individuals alleging harassment and excessive force." Carl stared at her, betrayal burning in his chest. "You're siding with them?" "I'm doing my job," Jessica replied, her voice firm. "Something you should consider." As Carl stormed out of the office, seething with rage, he realized he was losing control of the narrative. His attempts to intimidate others only made him look guiltier. Desperation clawed at him, pushing him toward reckless decisions. That evening, Madeline received a call from Colonel Mills. "We're moving forward," he informed her. "The evidence is overwhelming. By tomorrow, we'll file a formal complaint and request an independent investigation." Madeline exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of relief. "Thank you, sir. But this isn't just about me. It's about holding him accountable for everyone he's hurt." "I know," Mills said gravely. "And we will." Later that night, Carl was sitting alone in his apartment, drinking a few cans of beer. His mind raced as he tried to figure out how to salvage the situation. Then an idea struck him, one so dangerous it made his hands tremble. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "This is Carl Butcher," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need your help. There's someone causing trouble, and I need them dealt with." On the other end of the line, a gravelly voice responded. "How much are you willing to pay?" Carl swallowed hard, knowing he was crossing a line he couldn't uncross. "Whatever it takes." The courthouse was a stark contrast to the chaos of the police station, a solemn, orderly space where justice was meant to prevail. Rows of wooden benches filled with spectators stretched toward the judge's bench, flanked by towering pillars and adorned with the emblem of the scales of justice. Reporters scribbled notes in the back, while cameras clicked softly, capturing every moment of what promised to be a landmark case. Madeline sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture as composed as ever. Colonel Mills stood beside her, his presence commanding respect. Across the aisle, Carl fidgeted nervously, his usual bravado replaced by thinly veiled panic. His lawyer whispered reassurances, but even they couldn't mask the gravity of the situation. The judge, an elderly man with a stern gaze, called the courtroom to order. "This hearing will now proceed regarding the alleged misconduct of Officer Carl Butcher. Plaintiff, you may begin." Colonel Mills rose to his feet, addressing the court with measured authority. "Your Honor, today we present irrefutable evidence of systemic abuse perpetrated by Officer Butcher, an officer sworn to protect and serve, yet who has repeatedly violated the public trust." As Mills spoke, Madeline watched Carl carefully. His eyes darted around the room, searching for allies or escape routes. She knew this was only the beginning. Mills began by presenting video footage from Carl's body camera. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy but undeniable images of Carl's aggressive behavior during Madeline's arrest. The audio captured his dismissive tone, his refusal to acknowledge her credentials, and his unjustified escalation. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the footage played. Next came testimonies from other victims. A young woman recounted how Carl had pulled her over for no reason, issuing citations based on fabricated violations. An elderly man described being shoved to the ground during a routine stop, leaving him injured and humiliated. Each story added another layer to the portrait of a man drunk on power, unchecked by accountability. Jessica Trent took the stand next, her hands trembling slightly as she swore to tell the truth. Under questioning, she revealed the extent of Carl's manipulative tactics, how he bullied subordinates into silence, falsified reports, and covered up complaints. Her testimony struck a nerve, drawing audible murmurs from the crowd. Finally, it was Madeline's turn. She walked to the witness stand with purpose, her uniform immaculate, her medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. When asked to recount her experience, she spoke clearly and confidently, painting a vivid picture of Carl's abuse of authority. "He arrested me without probable cause," she said, her voice steady. "But more than that, he sought to humiliate me, to assert dominance over someone he perceived as a threat. What he didn't realize is that my resolve is stronger than his fear." Carl shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact, and cracks began to show in his facade. During a recess, Carl approached Madeline in the hallway outside the courtroom. His face was flushed, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you've won?" he hissed, leaning close enough for his words to carry weight. "You're nothing but a pawn in their game." Madeline turned to face him, her expression calm but piercing. "No, Carl, you've already lost. Every lie, every act of intimidation, it's all coming to light, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to retaliate, but before he could speak, Colonel Mills appeared at Madeline's side, his imposing figure radiating authority. "Back away, Officer Butcher," Mills warned, his tone icy. "Unless you want to add obstruction of justice to your list of charges." Carl hesitated, then stepped back, his jaw tight with suppressed fury. As he retreated, Madeline exchanged a glance with Jessica, who nodded reassuringly. They were winning not just for themselves but for everyone Carl had wronged. When the trial resumed, Mills delivered one final blow. He introduced a piece of evidence that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. A recording of Carl's phone call from the previous night. The gravelly voice on the other end confirmed Carl's attempt to hire someone to deal with Madeline, a blatant admission of conspiracy. The judge's gavel slammed down, silencing the murmurs that erupted throughout the room. "Officer Butcher, you are hereby suspended pending further investigation. This court will not tolerate such egregious breaches of the law." Carl collapsed into his chair, his face pale with disbelief. The walls he'd built around himself were crumbling, brick by brick. As the courtroom emptied, Madeline lingered behind, staring at the empty defendant's table. She felt a sense of vindication, but also a lingering unease. Justice had been served, at least partially, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Carl's actions were symptoms of a deeper rot within the system. Moments later, Jessica approached her, holding a folder. "There's something else you need to see," she said quietly. Inside were documents implicating higher-ups in the department, officers who had turned a blind eye to Carl's behavior, enabling his abuses for years. "What do we do now?" Jessica asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Madeline closed the folder, her expression resolute. "We keep fighting, because this isn't just about Carl." But as they left the courthouse together, neither noticed the shadowy figure watching them from across the street, a reminder that the battle was far from over. The aftermath of the trial rippled through Crestwood like a storm surge, leaving no corner untouched. For Carl Butcher, the fall was swift and merciless. Stripped of his badge, barred from law enforcement, and facing criminal charges, he found himself adrift in a world that had once bowed to his authority. His days were spent working as a security guard at a local mall, a far cry from the power he'd wielded as a police officer. One afternoon, Carl sat in the break room of his new job, staring blankly at the television mounted on the wall. A news segment featured Madeline Atwell being honored at a military ceremony, celebrated not only for her service but also for her courage in exposing corruption. Her face filled the screen, calm and resolute, as the reporter described her as a symbol of integrity and resilience. Carl clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his old badge, the one he'd been forced to surrender. It gleamed dully under the fluorescent lights, a relic of a life now lost. For a fleeting moment, he considered smashing it against the table, but instead he placed it carefully in a drawer. "You'll never be untouchable again," he muttered bitterly to himself, unaware of how prophetic his own words would prove. Meanwhile, Madeline was busy shaping a new future. Alongside Jessica Trent and Colonel Mills, she worked tirelessly to implement sweeping changes within the police department. Their first step was the creation of a civilian oversight committee, a group tasked with reviewing complaints, ensuring transparency, and holding officers accountable. Accountability isn't just about punishing bad actors, Madeline explained during a press conference. It's about building trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. That starts with listening. Her words resonated deeply with the public, sparking conversations about reform across the nation. Local leaders praised her efforts, while activists hailed her as a catalyst for change. But Madeline remained humble, deflecting praise onto those who had stood by her side. "This isn't my victory," she told reporters. "It belongs to everyone who refused to stay silent in the face of injustice." Jessica Trent found herself transformed by the experience. Once hesitant to challenge the status quo, she now emerged as a vocal advocate for reform. Promoted to a leadership role within the department, she became a mentor to younger officers, teaching them the importance of integrity and empathy. "It's not easy," Jessica admitted to Madeline during a quiet moment in the office they shared. "Some days it feels like we're pushing against a mountain. But then I remember why we started this, and I know it's worth it." Madeline smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Jessica's shoulder. Change takes time, but every step forward matters. For Carl, the weight of his choices grew heavier with each passing day. Late one night, unable to sleep, he drove to the outskirts of town, parking near an abandoned warehouse where he used to train recruits. He stepped out of his car, the cool air biting at his skin, and stared up at the stars. Memories flooded back. His early days on the force, when he genuinely believed in protecting others. The slow erosion of his ideals as power corrupted him. And finally, the moment Madeline Atwell walked into his life, dismantling everything he thought he knew. "I could have been better," he whispered to the empty night. "I should have been better." But regret offered no absolution. All he could do now was carry the burden of his mistakes and hope someday to find redemption. In the weeks that followed, Madeline returned to her work at the Veterans Center, finding solace in helping others heal. One evening, as she walked through the halls lined with photographs of soldiers past and present, she paused before a mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, unchanged yet profoundly different. She thought of all the lives touched by Carl's abuse, the fear, the pain, the scars. And she thought of the countless others still suffering under systems designed to protect the powerful. "The fight doesn't end here," she murmured to herself. "Not until everyone can live without fear." What does true justice look like? Is it punishment, reform, or something deeper? Share your thoughts below and let us know what resonates most with you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Embrace the Journey for more gripping tales.